Can you tell us about the turtle in the tank behind us? Oh, what kind of turtle we've got here?
On Kentucky Afield, we went live on social media and YouTube to answer all of your questions about Kentucky species that are not hunted, fished, or trapped. And we're bringing you those answers right now. It's time for the Kentucky Wild Question and Answer Show.
Kentucky Afield. Every week, Kentucky Afield brings you features on hunting and fishing across the state.
What a nice fish.
It's an opportunity to hopefully get that bird in the lake.
Hey, we got another one over here. There he is. Ooh, a nice one too. Boy, he's healthy. What do we got? That was awesome. Got the first kill. Barely made it out of the field.
Got one. Big smallmouth.
Very nice.
Double point, they're in there.
There they go.
Look at that joker. Woo! That's a good one there. Look at that. Beautiful. Whoa, this is a good one.
That's better than good, Chad.
Hello and welcome to Kentucky Afield. I'm your host, Chad Miles. Tonight, you've tuned into our annual question and answer show brought to you by Kentucky Wild. Tonight we answer all your questions about birds, bats, snakes, insects, and everything else. Joining me tonight, I have a panel of experts. First up, I have John McGregor, who is our state herpetologist. Thank you for coming. Seated right next to him is Michaela Rogers, who is a wildlife biologist. And tell me what you specialize in.
I handle our bat program. I also work with our Monarch and pollinator conservation program, and then end up dabbling in a variety of other at-risk species as the need comes up.
All right, very nice. And then on the end here, we have Michael Patton, who's also a wildlife biologist. What do you work with?
I work with Kentucky's raptors, songbirds, and nightjars.
Okay, all right. Well, you guys are all wearing your new Kentucky Wild shirts. You look great here, and we've already got a host of questions that have been coming through. We did run a contest. We have a couple of giveaways. Our first 4 questions are going to receive one of these Kentucky Wild hats. And if you're in the market for a Kentucky Wild hat, you can either go to the website and purchase a membership, or you can come see us at the State Fair coming up this week. So here's one of our new Kentucky Wild hats. All right, first up, we have a list of questions that have come through. This is one of our first question winners of this hat, and the question is, I've seen a significant decline in the number of insects that I've noticed around streetlights in urban and rural areas. Is there a decline, and is there anything we can do to help recover these species? First off, is that actually happening?
That is actually happening. It's happening almost worldwide, and scientists call it the insect apocalypse.
Oh, man.
And we are losing numbers, we are losing species all over the country, all over the world.
And what do you think is causing that?
Well, probably 2 major problems. In the U.S. anyway, it's too much light, where there are security lights everywhere, street lights, and it's drawing night-flying insects in and messing up their mating systems, and they're not going to the right spots to lay eggs. The other big problem are the pesticides being used. We are using super effective pesticides on our crops. It's impacting insect populations, not only in the crop fields, but also in the old fields and waste areas where the insect populations would be doing okay.
So the best way, if you're an individual, you want to kind of help out with this, what's the best thing you can do?
Boy.
Turn your lights off outside?
Turn your yard into a pollinator garden. Plant as many native species as possible.
Yeah.
And that'll provide food for nectar, food for insects and their larvae.
You know, it's interesting because every time I talk to biologists, regardless if you're trying to, what type of animal species you're trying to attract, the number one thing they usually say is reduce the footprint that you mow. If you just have fescues and you're mowing it every single week, man, it really does have a negative impact on wildlife, and it sounds like insects as well.
Insects are wildlife.
Yeah, exactly.
6-legged wildlife.
All right, next question here is, does Kentucky have a Hellbender population? And if so, what is their status? This is interesting because we've actually done a segment with you, Michaela, on Hellbenders. Here's an example of what a Hellbender, this is obviously not a real Hellbender, it's a model here of what a Hellbender looks like. Tell me a little bit about Hellbenders, and do we have Hellbenders in Kentucky?
We do have Hellbenders in Kentucky, so that model is a life-size adult. It's one of the largest kind of that they can get is that model. And really, Hellbenders should be found pretty much statewide in creeks, streams, and rivers that have good water quality. As far as their status goes, they are appearing to experience some declines due to sedimentation, pollution in the water, just general habitat fragmentation, and that's something that biologists here are actively trying to study. Now, the thing with these creatures is they like to live under the bottom of large rocks, so you can imagine how challenging it is to actually find Hellbenders. And so that's why one of the things that we ask the public to do is actually submit records of if they see a Hellbender, if they're, an angler and they catch a Hellbender out fishing, making sure that they submit that record to us because we're really interested in where these Hellbenders are located.
And take a photo of it.
Take a
Please.
picture. Yeah, because there is another species that's slightly smaller than a Hellbender. But if you were to, a person might be like, oh my gosh, look at this, what have I caught here? If you were to catch one of these.
It's probably a common reaction.
Yeah, it would be your first reaction is, what is this? Try to take a hook out of one of these mouths. As far as grabbing this like you would, any other fish species, and try to get a hook out. Is it pretty easy to do?
So they're really slippery. If you'll hand it to me, I can kind of show you a little bit of a grip that you can try to hold it with, which this one's a bit, it's a model, so it's a bit harder. You can actually put your hands like this and try to support both sides of its body. If you can have somebody else hold it for you while you do that, that's probably going to be the easiest way.
You don't have any concerns with being bit and any of that type of thing, right?
They do have teeth, but they're like little rows of teeth. So if you can just kind of get it to where you're holding it, and try to have somebody else hold it so you can get that hook out. They do have teeth, so they can bite, but it's not going to be anything,
It's not going to be, yeah.
Have you ever been bitten by a Hellbender, John?
I have not.
Okay, I haven't either, but.
But have you ever seen someone be bit? I mean, is it something that it's not going to be like a snapping turtle or nothing?
They're much more frightened of you and wanting to get away from you. So as quickly as you can get that out.
Yeah, and so we're doing a lot of work on Hellbenders, and it's a really cool species. So if you have an opportunity to save one, definitely not save one, take it home, but save one meaning take the hook out and remove it and get it back into the water as quickly as possible. Then that would be great, right?
Yes, especially our these adults that we're hoping are out there breeding. We definitely want to try to preserve the population as much as possible.
All right. Next question. What is the best way to get our kids interested in the outdoors? Wow. Now this is an interesting question because more and more people kids are wanting to spend time on iPhones and computers and TV. What do you recommend, Michael, is a good way to get a kid interested in the outdoors?
I think the best way to get them outdoors is to go out the front door, right? You don't have to go out into some remote wilderness tract that's hard to get to. You go into your backyard, go down the street, go to your neighborhood park, go see what you can see. Look at plants, look at the animals. Start a little, native pollinator patch in your backyard if you can. Plant a little pot full of flowers, see what you're attracting. Once you start seeing all these different animals, kids can get really hooked on it. They can try to figure out all these different species, they can get really excited about it, and that's going to, essentially trigger more and more enthusiasm for the outdoors. There's things like, our department offers summer camps that expose kids to the outside, things like those programs. Kentucky Wild's a great program where they can learn all about the native animals in Kentucky, and they can go out with biologists potentially and help kind of implement some of that conservation throughout the state potentially.
It's interesting. I love how you say walk out the front door, because if you want to get a kid interested in the outdoors, if they don't have to be dependent on transportation from someone else to recreate that outdoor experience, it's right there, literally in their backyard. That's always going to be the easiest and best.
Absolutely.
For me, we're so lucky in the state of Kentucky. We've got so many small streams, creeks. Man, you just get into a creek stream, ankle deep, and start flipping over rocks. I'll never forget that as a kid. It's fascinating. I'm sure that all of us who got into either wildlife biology or me, spent a life in the outdoors, remember being a kid and flipping over rocks in creeks. So it's a great way to get out there and introduce a young kid to the outdoors. Next question here. What can we do to help monarch butterflies? We hear this quite often. What plants or habitat can we plant to attract and benefit them? Everyone loves monarch butterflies.
They really do.
Tell me a little bit about monarch butterflies, what the status of them are, and then what we can do to help see, attract, and protect monarch butterflies.
Yeah, so monarch butterflies, their population has been in decline over the past 20 or so years. It's been really striking over the past 5 or 10 years. This past year, the monarchs that we're normally seeing right now, they had a really, really low overwintering population. So they're all counted in the winter when they're have actually overwintered and migrated to Mexico. So that's when they're most dormant. So that's when their count is done. And we were down 59% this year from the previous count. So the way that they're counted is by hectares. And so however many monarch butterflies that are just covering these trees are in a single hectare, they add all of those up. It's kind of like puzzling them together. We did not even reach 1 hectare this year for the overwintering population.
Wow.
So if you are not seeing a lot of monarch butterflies in your backyard, in your neighborhood, that is why. We've started to see a couple of them. There's a few records coming in, but we are definitely having a low year for monarchs.
Okay.
And so really the best thing you can do specifically for monarch butterflies is to plant milkweed. And so milkweed is their host plant for their caterpillars. So the caterpillars have to have that specific plant. I mean, there's a variety of species of milkweed. You've got your butterfly milkweed, swamp, common, all kinds of different types of milkweed, but they have to have something in the milkweed family in order to eat that plant and grow into a butterfly.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's the biggest thing.
If you want to see more butterflies, you need to have milkweed,
yes.
right?
And then like John was saying, creating as much habitat in your yard as possible for pollinators in general. So planting both the milkweed that the caterpillars need to grow to adulthood, but also planting things like, blooming plants for the adults to feed on. So you kind of have both sides of the equation.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Are armadillos starting to, they are starting to be spotted here in eastern Kentucky more frequently. Are they here to stay?
Armadillos are here to stay.
Yeah.
They started in Kentucky sometime in the 1980s. By about 2000, we had them just in the land between the lakes area and west of there. Since then, they have spread across to the Elizabethtown area, all through the bluegrass, across southern Kentucky. We've also had them show up in like Pike County and Knott County. Those armadillos probably came from Virginia.
Okay.
So we're getting them from two sides. They've come across Indiana, probably because our winters are getting milder and armadillos are really sensitive to cold, and they're just not being knocked back. So,
interesting. We ran into an armadillo out at Land Between the Lakes filming a segment this year, and a lot of times you have a certain impression of an animal species, and when you encounter them, it's totally different than what you thought. That's an athletic animal. Armadillos can get going pretty fast, jump higher than what you would think. They were jumping over laid down logs, and I was like, that was not what I was expecting.
they can't see very well.
Yeah.
They just kind of bumble along and dig for grubs and stuff, and you can walk right up to one and surprise it.
Oh yeah.
And when you do, it'll jump straight up in the air.
Yes.
3-4 feet in the air.
I was shocked. I wasn't expecting to be able to see this thing bound up in the air like that.
And that's why they get hit on the road so much.
Yeah.
People try to straddle an armadillo, it gets startled and it jumps straight up and bashes itself on the undercarriage of it.
It's interesting you talk about seeing them on the road. If you look in the spring, we take trips down to Western Kentucky quite a bit. They're on the side of the roads very frequently. You get on the WK Parkway, you're going to see a couple. They're there quite often. So the population must be pretty growing pretty fast, I'm assuming.
They are doing very well.
All right, next question. Are there copperheads in Campbell County or any known northern Kentucky area that biologists have confirmed?
Copperheads are in most counties in the state. There are a few bluegrass counties where we have no records.
Okay.
Like Scott County is one, Spencer County, Washington, Bourbon. But northern Kentucky, we do have copperheads in all 3 northern Kentucky counties. They're not common. They're mostly in the hills, right along the Ohio River, and right along where the Licking River flows northward to the Ohio. But
I'm assuming that, normally we get these type of questions because there's a debate going on that someone thought they saw a copperhead. Maybe it was a copperhead, maybe it wasn't. But what other species in that area could potentially be thought of? I think I saw a copperhead, but it's not.
People see a snake. If it's in the water, it's a water moccasin. If it's got a pattern, it's a copperhead. so that covers about everything.
Yeah.
So
Take a picture.
take a picture of it, and I can confirm it for you.
Yeah, yeah. You love getting pictures of animals like that throughout the state.
Yeah, I do. I really like getting getting photos of
we're gonna get through a lot of questions today, but many of our biologists, they may not be able to answer your call immediately, but they can be reached throughout the normal work schedule. So reach out to them, leave them a message, and if you have a question, but pictures are always the best, aren't they? A real good, high quality photo can tell you guys can tell them exactly what they're looking at, right? So if you got a snake or species and you want to know what it is, get a good photo and get a hold of John. You'd be glad to confirm
even a
it.
mediocre photo.
Oh, yeah. All right.
We'll take it. We just don't have any promises.
All right. Next question. Have there been any updates from the Mothus toward the track birds, towers that track birds around the state? I'm not sure what that is.
I think you're talking about the MODIS stations throughout Kentucky.
Okay.
So MODIS is an international network of automated telemetry stations. So they're looking at specific radio frequencies that we attach these transmitters to birds, and these are sending off a little radio frequency that these towers are picking up. And as a bird flies by, it's going to ping off that tower, and it's going to let researchers like myself know that that individual was near that station.
Okay.
Fairly recently, we had a summer tanager that was tagged down in Colombia on a shade-grown coffee farm, and it flew through Costa Rica, pinged off a few of the MODIS stations there, and then actually settled in for the breeding season at Taylorsville Lake here in Kentucky. A birder named James Weed actually saw this little backpack transmitter on the bird, got a photo of it, and we went out there and confirmed it, and we were able to determine that that bird traveled well over 2,000 miles to breed in Kentucky from Colombia.
So what all birds are you putting trackers like that on?
So right now we have a big project deploying these on wood thrushes in eastern and central Kentucky. We're trying to learn more about their full annual cycle. So we're trying to determine, we know they breed here, but where specifically are Kentucky's birds going for the wintertime? Okay. So hopefully as they're flying south, they're gonna ping off all those MODIS stations that are going up all over the US, down in Mexico, down in South America. And as these birds are flying, we should hopefully figure out where they're going.
Okay, all right, very cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool. Technology, huh?
Yeah, it's improving every day.
It's amazing. Next question is about armadillos again. Want to know if all armadillos carry leprosy?
I don't know. Some do. The transmission of leprosy from armadillo to human is very rare.
Okay.
I know of 2 cases in Louisiana.
Okay.
And these were guys who live in the swamp and actually ate armadillos.
Okay.
And probably didn't wash their hands.
Okay. So as far as just handling them, it's not. It's probably not
anything,
recommended, but you probably.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about leprosy.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Next question: is there any more information about the summer tanager that migrate from America to South America to Kentucky?
So right now, we were out there about 2 weeks ago, and that bird was still hanging around. We were expecting it to migrate probably towards the end of this month. It'll start leaving, heading now back, hopefully towards Columbia. It'd be really neat if it flew back to that same coffee farm, and we were able to determine that was its winter range right there.
How long will that trek for that bird take?
That's a great question.
This tracking device may help you out with that.
Yeah, if we can try to pinpoint when it leaves, and if it shows back up, we can get a really good idea of exactly how long that trip took. Usually it depends on the species. It can range anywhere from a few days to a few weeks.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Next question. What has become of flying squirrels? I used to see them as a kid, but hasn't seen a flying squirrel in years. Anybody have any info on flying squirrels?
Flying squirrels are doing okay.
Okay.
The best way to see them, if you live near a woods, keep your bird feeder filled and have it near some trees. And they will come to bird feeders at night and eat sunflower seeds.
Oh,
or
really?
if you go to some of the state parks, like Natural Bridge, outside the dining room, they have bird feeders. Mm-hmm. And you can walk out there at night and see flying squirrels at the feeder. Which is really neat. They are quite common.
Okay. So population of flying squirrels are doing well.
They're doing well.
We catch them in bat mist nets occasionally.
Oh, do you? Oh, that would be pretty wild. But Flying squirrels are pretty small, but they're big compared to a bat, right?
Yes.
When one hits that, you'd be like, wow, that's something different.
I learned how much they can bite when I first tried to get one out years ago.
Yeah, I don't think
I learned that you have to take them out with a stick and not your hand. Let me just preface that by saying hold the stick up to them, not batting them out of it.
Oh, next question. Is there a decline in frogs in the bluegrass region? We just don't see them like we used to. They don't have a particular species of frogs, but how are frogs doing?
It kind of depends. People who have clean ponds, mow around them, they're not going to see many frogs. If you want frogs, you want to have some old fields around your pond, and you want to have cattails and lots of emergent vegetation.
Is that because the birds and that are able to pick them off, or the frogs just don't
a lot of the
that?
frogs, their territories are, when they're mating, like bullfrogs, green frogs, they use vegetation to kind of guide where their territories are.
Okay.
So the more cattails, then the smaller the territories are going to be for the calling male bullfrogs.
Okay. So you need cattails and some type of vegetation.
You know, most frogs in the bluegrass seem to be doing okay. The toads seem to not be doing as well.
Okay.
And part of that is loss of insects that they feed on.
Yeah. All right, interesting. Are crawfish in Kentucky streams safe to consume? And are there any regulations for the take of crawfish? Anybody ever tried to eat a crawfish? I've never eaten. I've eaten a lot of crayfish, but the ones that come up from Louisiana, the other different species, not here.
When I worked for the transportation department, guys I worked with went out and seined crawdads and ate them.
Really?
I'm thinking, you guys are eating crawdads out of Hickman Creek. That gets all the sewage from Lexington.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah. No, I would definitely not recommend eating crayfish. There's a process they go through, even with the ones down in the south that they do eat, where they think they soak them for a period of time to try to remove all the waste. And I don't know how to do all that. I'm not going to take my chances.
You know, the ones they raise in those ponds, you know, those are fine.
Yeah. And so as far as rules and regulations, are there any rules and regulations on that? I think that for using them for bait, there's some rules and regulations on how many you're allowed to have.
It's like 100 or something.
Maybe 100.
Yeah.
Check your rules and regulations on that for fishing wise, which we just did a show on using live crawdads for bait. So it could be a great bait. I wouldn't recommend consuming them, but you have to ask someone smarter than me to
If they're
find out
asking
if it's
about
safe.
protected crayfish, we have the big sandy crayfish, so that might be part of what they were asking about. But, you know, that species is not one you can collect.
Yeah. Okay. So know what you're picking up and what you're used for, but we're not sure about eating them, right? Next question. We used to find Hellbender in Drakes Creek in Warren County. Is this river one that might be restocked with them in the future? And you know where they're talking about, Drakes Creek, Warren County?
Yeah, that is not a creek that is currently on our radar for the reintroductions, but I mean, as far as the reintroduction program, that is something that, you know, we foresee continuing to work with our partners for many years to come. So if, you know, there is opportunities throughout the state to try to figure out where they're most needed, that's kind of what we're working off of right now. And, you know, just if they do, I know they said they used to see records there, so if they do find any more records, please do let us know. Like we said, take a picture and just let us, you know so we can keep track of how they're doing there.
I'm assuming that when you guys start to come back to put species that are in decline, you're only putting them back in areas that you have records of them being in the past, right? Where you know that they are a native. Is this area, I know we're not having any plans really soon to be putting anything back in Drakes Creek, but is that Hellbender Creek that you know of that used to have them in the past? Do we have records of Hellbenders being in there in the past? Do you know?
I'm not exactly sure.
You know, I could look that up, but I don't have my computer.
Oh, yeah.
But, you know, with Drakes Creek, and I think it's in the Barren River drainage maybe, the Green River drainage Hellbenders are genetically different from the Hellbenders in the Kentucky River and the Licking River and further east. And we still have a PhD who's working on Hellbender genetics, and he can't yet tell us whether we can take our eastern Kentucky Hellbenders that we're raising and put
Okay.
them in the Green River. It might be a totally different species.
So we're doing some research on this right now, but you're
We're
talking
working on
about,
that now.
we're getting toward Warren County. You're talking about the
Yeah.
kind of the Green River drainage area. So you're
Right.
saying that it might be a different genetic
It
species.
might be a
on-
whole different species.
Okay.
We need a lot more information.
Okay. So if you get a confirmed location and picture, that would be a great one to have, right? Mm-hmm. All right. Next question. What is the range and estimated population of pygmy rattlesnakes in Kentucky? Are they only in Land Between the Lakes?
We have them there are 2 counties. They're in eastern Callaway,
Okay.
bordering Kentucky Lake, and then they're in Trigg County on Land Between the Lakes.
Okay.
And that's the whole range of the pygmy rattlesnake in Kentucky.
Okay.
Parts of 2 counties.
Have you encountered them in the wild?
You know, the last time I saw a pygmy rattlesnake in the wild was like 1973.
Okay.
So
Wow.
one turns up every few years. A couple of years ago, someone found one hiking a trail at LBL, and there have been a couple in Callaway County in the last 2 or 3 years. So
Okay. Okay. So
they're still here, but they're hard to find. They're curled up usually under a pine tree, and they blend in really well with pine needles, and you just don't see them. And
Yeah.
when they rattle, it's such a faint buzz you can't hear it. So.
Oh, okay. So, next question. I see several bald eagles around Taylorsville Lake, and I think I've seen a couple golden eagles. Can you confirm if there's been any golden eagles in the area?
If you're seeing them this time of year, we wouldn't expect for golden eagles to quite be in Kentucky quite yet. It's usually towards a little bit further into the fall where they'll migrate down this way. If you're seeing them around now, it's more than likely an immature bald eagle.
Okay.
Those hatch-year or second-year birds can look a lot like golden eagles. They're very brown. They don't have that distinct white head so that's probably what they're seeing. We do have golden eagles, though, in Kentucky. They do come in. You can find them, in Western Kentucky, Central Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky. You're more likely to see them in Eastern Kentucky, though, if you're trying to find them. All that being said, they are quite rare, but they are here.
Okay. And so the interesting thing about birds is they grow really fast, right? So an immature bald eagle, size-wise, you may go, oh, it's too big to be an immature, bald eagle, but it can be full size almost.
Yeah, actually, when they leave the nest, a female bald eagle, when she leaves the nest, that's the biggest type of bald eagle, actually. They're actually larger than the fully sexually mature adults.
Really?
That's just, they're still getting their flight feathers a little bit longer, so their wingspan's larger. But yeah, as soon as any bird, raptor or songbird leaves the nest, that's the size they're going to be probably for the rest of their life.
So yeah, it's interesting. So when you see one and you go, oh no, it's not. It can't be a bald eagle because it's too big to be an immature. No, when they leave the nest, they're fully grown,
That's
full
right.
size.
Yep.
So, all right, very interesting information there. Next question here. Are whippoorwills in decline? We get this question at this show almost every year. What do you know about the whippoorwill populations?
They are in decline. So that's the species of greatest conservation need in Kentucky.
Okay.
And they are declining pretty rapidly. They prefer clear understories in forested habitats, and with a lot of the invasive species that are coming into Kentucky, that understory is starting to fill up with a lot of shrubs. So there's less habitat for them. Insect declines, they're big insectivores, so as insects decline, therefore they have less food, so they're declining as well. And they're pretty susceptible to predation from things like, feral cats and whatnot that are actually eating, chicks and adults too. So there's just a lot of things working against the species that's causing
It's
them to
amazing. If
decline.
you sat there in one spot and sang the same song as loud as you could sing it, you're probably susceptible too.
Yep.
Because they just sit there and go on and on and on. We hear them around the lakes in eastern Kentucky, Lake Cumberland and that type of area.
Yeah.
Every night we're out there, and they will sit there all night. It seems like
They sure will, but if you go try to find them and actually see them, they are hard to spot. They
Oh,
blend
really?
in very well.
Very interesting. Really, it's a really unique bird.
Absolutely.
What should I do if a bird is dead near my feeder? Should I be worried? So apparently someone has a feeder out and a bird has died there near the feeder.
Yeah, so if you're just seeing one bird, there's the possibility that maybe it just succumbed to some illness that it already had, or there was some predation. event that took place and it was just left there. If you think it's a disease and you're seeing a lot of birds at your feeder, you can fill out one of our disease forms on our website, or you can call us and we'll get in touch with you. At that point, usually what you're going to want to do is take down your feeder. You're going to want to sterilize it with a bleach water solution, so 9 parts water, 1 part bleach, just give it a good cleaning. And I recommend that you leave the feeders down for a few weeks, about 2 weeks, just in case there is a disease of some sort that's on the feeder in the surrounding area. Just let that kind of cool off so you're not infecting all of the birds in your yard.
So you don't get too concerned, but just take precautions and get that cleaned up, keep it down for a period of time, and then...
Exactly. We're not seeing, bird flu going through the songbird population right now or anything like that. So I wouldn't be too concerned. But things like finch eye disease, if you're seeing like house finches that have crusty eyes or that they're dead underneath the feeder, go ahead, take them down, clean them.
Okay. Again, a good picture of a dead bird, a close-up where you can kind of see that type of thing.
Exactly.
And submit that. It's a really good way to make sure that, and the birds die, so it could be no big deal, but you get a really close picture of it, you might be able to determine more as a biologist.
Exactly.
Right?
We can help you identify what it is, possibly what went wrong, and advise you from there.
Fantastic. Next question, will butterflies use butterfly boxes? I'm not sure what they're talking about there, but
so
help me out.
Yeah, there are a type of box that you can find, and they have just like these little thin kind of slits in them, and they're labeled as butterfly boxes. I've actually gotten this question quite a few times because people will buy them and then they won't really see any butterflies use them. They'll end up with usually like paper wasps or spiders will inhabit them. So you are providing habitat, you're just not exactly providing habitat for the creature that you initially wanted. Butterflies are really sun-loving. So, when it's sunny outside, you might be more likely to see a lot of them across any field you're looking at. And so a butterfly box, while they're cute and they might have little designs on them, it's not exactly something that a butterfly is going to use.
It would be a little bit of a shock for a little girl puts a butterfly box up and goes and gets wasp in it. She's not going to be very happy with that.
Yeah, I've had a couple calls where people are asking about them and if butterflies are ever going to use them, because right now it's just wasps, and really, the better thing that you can do, like we talked about earlier, is putting in, those native plants for butterflies.
Oh man, yeah, there you go. So milkweed, you want to see butterflies, put the milkweed.
Milkweed, purple cone flowers, black-eyed Susans, bee balms, all kinds of pollinator plants.
All right. Next question. Are there any birds that in Kentucky that are on the endangered or protected list?
So I work mostly with raptors and songbirds. As of right now, there are no federally listed raptors or songbirds. I think there are a few wading birds and possibly waterfowl that are, but they're not, like our whooping cranes that come in Western Kentucky occasionally. But I don't work with that species, so I can't tell you too much about it. But as of right now, there's not. There is one species that's under review for possible listing. That's the golden-winged warbler. We have a small population in eastern Kentucky, but it's currently under review, so it's not technically listed yet.
Okay, all right, very interesting. A lot of
But
people.
all birds are protected,
Yeah.
or just about.
Yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
And that's interesting because we get, these questions, a lot of these questions are all about, I get calls and texts constantly about, hey, I've got this particular species, or I want to see this particular species around my house more often. Usually, I'd say about 80% is I want to see more of these species. Sometimes it's, hey, how do I get this bird out of my yard, or how do I get this, whatever this animal is. It might be a beaver, it might be an otter in their pond. Birds are a unique situation. So how do you keep a bird? Because some birds are like blue herons, for example. We talked about frogs. I get people that have frog ponds, or they have maybe a goldfish pond or whatever, and they see that blue heron on there and they're like, oh my gosh, I got to get this bird out of here. What's a good way to deter an animal from utilizing a space that you don't want it to be in?
Right. So like John said, pretty much all birds in Kentucky are protected by the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. Now, if it's a bird you can't physically harm them, you can't kill them, you can't shoot them, or anything like that, but you can essentially dissuade them from being there. If it's like a blue heron that you don't want in your pond, you can essentially just keep harassing it, driving it away, and it'll fly off, and it'll get to the point eventually where it doesn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
So you're not actually causing harm. It's going to find food, at your neighbor's pond, perhaps, not yours. But it's the same thing, and all these scenarios are very species dependent. So if you have an issue with, let's just say, like blackbirds roosting behind your house that are creating a mess, and they're very loud, call the department, you'll get in touch with us, and we can provide you with specific recommendations for the case that you actually have.
Okay, very good. Because buzzards, herons, those are the type of calls that sometimes people go like, hey, how do you? I know I can't harm this bird, but how do I handle that? And you're saying just 2 or 3 times pester it away, and it very well may not come back.
It's probably going to be more like probably 2 weeks of constant pestering, but yes.
Yeah.
Put a dead dog in your neighbor's yard so that the vultures go over there.
Oh, is that? We won't talk about how you get a dead dog. But next question is, how does Kentucky Wild keep all of these animals, help all these animals? I'm sorry, you can tell I'm having a rough time reading my phone here. How does Kentucky Wild help all of these animals? We're talking about all kinds of different species of animals, and tell me a little bit about some of the species that each one of you are working with through Kentucky Wild to help, establish new populations or monitor. Are you working with animal species are you working with through Kentucky Wild?
Yeah, we have just started a pine snake restoration project.
Okay.
And we're working with Murray State University and trying to identify good habitat, and then we'll be working with the Louisville Zoo to try to establish a breeding population of northern pine snakes that originated in Kentucky to try to restore populations. And Kentucky Wild helps to fund that stuff.
Okay. Tell me what you're doing with Kentucky Wild. And if there's any outdoor projects that you guys are working on where you take volunteers on, let me know about that too.
Yeah, so we've been able to use Kentucky Wild funds to purchase lots of pollinator seeds. So we've been able to get that out on the ground, so different swaths of pollinator habitat. So we're putting as much as possible as far as the habitat goes. We've used Kentucky Wild dollars to buy, monitoring items like Monarch tags for monarch butterflies, so that we can hopefully pick up some of those butterflies, after they have flown to Mexico. The bat side of things, we have used Kentucky Wild funding to fund cave gates. So if there is a cave that has a huge amount of disturbance and there are very endangered bats in there that are trying to, rear their young, and they will unfortunately die if there's too much disturbance, we've been able to use that funding to put gates over some of those really sensitive caves.
Okay, very cool. How about you?
We've used Kentucky Wild money to build like peregrine falcon nest boxes, barn owl nest boxes to increase essentially nesting availability for these species that are still imperiled. They're spreading through Kentucky, but if we can put a barn owl box up that a barn owl is going to use, the chances of all those chicks in there surviving to adulthood is much higher than if they're in your hay loft or something like that where the raccoons could get at them. We also use Kentucky Wild to fund all these motor stations that we're putting up, and that's informing us all about where our birds are going, what kind of habitat use are they using that during migration, and therefore we can learn a lot more about how to conserve these species.
Okay, and I'm sure that there are some probably federal programs that we're using Kentucky Wild dollars are probably getting some match funds in some of these ways too, some federal dollars on some of this stuff. Are there programs like that as well? I mean, do you guys file for grants using outside dollars like we do in fisheries and wildlife does that? I'm sure you guys probably do some of that as well. I'm guessing.
Yeah, we're able to use that. And then we can also use things like volunteer hours as match on some of our grants. So, when we can get people out for volunteer opportunities, that also helps us if we can collect that information and use it, for grants to continue to further the funding.
So Kentucky Wild membership start at $25, and they get you on a list where you may get some additional information. A $35 one, I think, gets you a T-shirt, but it also gets you as part of a group where you can do some outside potential research with these individuals. But also, if they have an opportunity for some matching funds, your $35 may turn into much more. I know that happens on, like, say, the fisheries side, and I'm assuming that that's probably the case. You're saying that hours that a person donates can also be used for match dollars for federally?
Yeah, we were able to do like a cave cleanup event, which is a little bit different from some of our Kentucky Wild events, but it's similar where we brought people out and basically cleaned up some of the debris that was in a cave from when it was used as a show cave. So we can kind of use events like that where we bring volunteers out to help us with that sort of thing.
Very cool. So if you wanted to learn more about Kentucky Wild, you can go to the Department of Fish and Wildlife's website and search for Kentucky Wild and learn more about some of the projects they're working on and how to become more involved. So fw.ky.gov and search for Kentucky Wild. How many different lizards are there in Kentucky, and how many of them are poisonous?
Okay, 0 are poisonous.
There you go.
We have 10 kinds of lizards in the state. 8 are native, and then the other 2 are introduced. So if you want to see lizards, go up to northern Kentucky in Kenton and Campbell counties near the Ohio River, and you will see Lazarus lizards. All those are the European wall lizards, and they started in Cincinnati. They were brought over from Italy by members of the Lazarus department store family and released. And so it's really neat. Northern Kentucky has very few native lizards, and these have kind of filled an empty niche.
Okay.
But our native lizards, the fence lizards, are statewide. We have 5 different kinds of skinks, and we have a glass lizard, which looks like a snake, or also called a glass snake. And it's very rare.
Okay.
But it's on our conservation need list.
But none of them are poisonous.
We have no venomous lizards.
Okay. Next question. I had a bat hanging in the outside of my underpinning on my house during the day. Is it sick, or why would it be there during that time of the day?
So this time of year, we're not really concerned if there are bats, in places that you're not used to seeing them. This is the time of year where the juvenile bats have just become volant or just become, flying for the first time. So similar to fledgling birds, they can, they're a little bit clumsier. They can get into some strange places. It may have just been that bat, did one of its first flights, got tired, and kind of just stayed put right where it's at. In the evening time, the landowner should see it fly off and go forage for insects. If it's there for 4 or 5 days, it potentially needs some help, and they may want to contact a wildlife rehabber. But really, this time of year, we're not extremely concerned about one bat that's out in a bit of a strange place.
Okay, all right. I have a black vulture roost within 50 yards of my property. Do I need to worry about any type of disease?
They are carrion eaters, so there's the potential for disease transmission. That being said, it's very uncommon. If it's one of those things, you own the property and you don't want them there, you're welcome to call our department. We can advise you about how to essentially mitigate that roost, at least just drive them off. It is a fairly involved process, and it can be fairly noisy. Essentially, you're going to be creating loud noises. But as far as diseases, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Okay, all right. And it says 50 yards off my property, so it doesn't really say how close it is to the house. So I don't know if it's, but if you have one really close to the house and you want to get them moved away, call you guys, and you have a way that you can discourage them from being there.
Yep, we'll give you the whole game plan of how to get rid of them.
All right, next question. Is the tiger salamander common or rare, and are we monitoring them?
We don't monitor tiger salamanders. They are very common from about Shelbyville west.
Okay.
So they're western 2/3 of the state. Their range just kind of stops when you get east of there.
Okay.
But they are really common. I get a lot of photos of them because they're big, but they come out of the ground in usually January or February, go to a pond, court, lay eggs, go back into the burrows that they came out of, and you don't see them again until the next winter or spring.
Very common, and we're not monitoring because they seem to be doing pretty well.
They're doing really well.
All right. Next question. How concerned should Kentuckians be about venomous snakes? Should we carry a snake bite kit while hiking?
The best thing to do if you're ever bitten by a venomous snake, seek medical attention.
Yeah.
Don't use a snake bite kit. Don't cut into the wound. Don't apply suction. Don't apply ice. Don't apply a tourniquet. You can do much more damage trying to treat a snake bite than if you just got to a doctor as quickly as possible.
So snake bite kits, you recommend no snake bite kits? While
I
hiking.
recommend
Seek medical attention.
leave the snake bite kit at home.
And if you do happen to get bit by a snake anywhere, you don't need to take that snake with you to the hospital and all that, right?
No, take a picture of it, but I mean, they'll be able to tell by the pain and swelling if it's truly a venomous snake bite.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, about half of venomous snake bites are dry bites, where the snake is just irritated because you stepped on him, and he'll turn around and not inject any venom. The snake uses venom to get its food. It doesn't want to waste it on defense.
Now, you have actually been bitten by a venomous snake at one point in time.
I was bitten when I was in college.
Okay. So did you know immediately that it was not a dry bite?
Oh yeah.
So there's no like if you get bit and you're questioning whether or not it was not a dry bite, you're gonna know.
It was
right?
an intense burning pain. It was like when you step on a lit cigarette and it sticks to your foot.
Okay.
I
So
mean, it was like molten metal.
I just asked that question. You have a little bit of experience with it, so people would. You're not going to have to question whether or not it was a dry bite or not. You're going to know, right?
Yeah. Now most venomous snake bites in Kentucky are from copperheads. There are no records of anyone in Kentucky ever dying from a copperhead bite.
Okay.
So not that it can't happen, but
Yeah.
it's not even usually fatal to a small dog.
Okay.
The only snake bite fatalities that I know of since 1950 have been half a dozen timber rattlesnake deaths, and they all happened in churches where people were passing around live rattlesnakes
And they did not seek medical
and
attention.
did not seek medical attention.
Okay. So any people who really
You're not
They're
going to
terrified of
die from
snakes.
venomous snake bite.
yeah seek medical attention.
If you seek medical attention.
Yeah. All right. Next question is: can you tell us about the turtle in the tank behind us? What kind of turtle we've got here?
That is a spiny soft shell, and that particular turtle, I found that turtle about 15 years ago. It was a baby, and it was in a creek outside of Frenchburg, and part of its shell had been scraped off. And I picked it up and took it home, and my wife took care of it and raised it in the kitchen, and got it up to about this big, and then I brought it to the Salado Center.
Is that it?
That's it.
That's
It's
it. So
been here
you
ever
actually saved this turtle, and how old is this turtle now?
I have to look, but it was in the maybe 2005, 2006. So it's
Wow.
close to 20 years. That's a male, and it's full grown.
Okay.
The soft shells, the females are huge.
Yeah, I've seen them get pretty big. Yeah.
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 But males are much smaller, and that's pretty much full grown for a male.
Very
spiny
interesting.
soft shell.
Very interesting. You actually brought something today too. What did you bring? Are you
I
speaking
brought-
of picking up and saving? And I don't know what the story behind this is. You actually have a little snake here.
I just caught this just for this. This is a full-grown Decay's brown snake.
Okay.
We have about 6 different kinds of snakes in the state that get no bigger than this.
Okay.
So
And so
these
that's
guys,
a really common snake, and it's a full-grown.
they're common everywhere but the bluegrass.
Okay.
For some reason, we don't have them in the bluegrass. But these guys eat slugs,
Okay.
and it may be that we just don't have the right slugs
Yeah. Yeah.
in the bluegrass for Decay's brown snakes.
Okay.
But these are common in wetlands and low woods, eastern Kentucky, southern, western. Real common in like the swampy woodlands in western Kentucky.
It looked like when you first picked it up, it didn't really like being handled, but now it's kind of starting to settle down a little bit.
It doesn't like this. But what's it going to do about it?
Yeah. It's a 6-inch snake. He looks.
It can't possibly bite me.
Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah.
That's
so
kinda-
these guys, if you have them in your garden, they eat mostly slugs. So
Okay. It's pretty good to have around, huh?
they're good to have around.
That's interesting. That kind of goes into our next question. I'll let you take care of your snake. We'll start on the other end down there with Michael. What is your favorite animal to work with?
My favorite animal to work with? That's a very difficult question. Right now, it's probably still the peregrine falcon.
Okay.
Just a very, very neat bird, and I get a very up close and personal encounter with them during the breeding season. We go out, we monitor them, we try to band the chicks if we're able to. They're just a very cool, charismatic species, and they're very rare in Kentucky still. We only have about 18 pairs statewide. So when we find a new, peregrine falcon nest, all the bird people get very, very excited about it.
Oh yeah. So peregrine falcons, that's your favorite animal species to work with. Michaela, what about you? What's your favorite animal species to work with?
I think I change this answer every time I'm on this show, but I'm going to change it again.
Good.
My favorite animal to work with, I think, is the Virginia big-eared bat. That is one of our species with those charismatic large ears.
Yeah.
And the reason that they're my favorite to work with is because they have the most fascinating movements. We will find a new cave for them that we're like, okay, that's great. They're here. We're going to monitor them here. We're going to count them here. You'll come back a few weeks later, they've all packed up and moved somewhere. And it's just, they keep you on your toes, and they're just constantly, doing different things that make them frustrating but fascinating to study.
That's cool. I can tell you love your job, because when every year it's something new that is now your favorite thing to do, tell you don't have a desk job where you're doing the same thing every single day. So
it's like a constant mystery almost.
That's great. What's your favorite species, John?
My favorite thing to do is I love going out and looking under tin and finding copperheads. Copperhead's my favorite snake.
Okay.
But I also really like going to southeastern Kentucky and walking around at night and looking at the salamanders that live in the rock outcrops.
Okay.
So, I live for those two things.
You really like those? I've actually been out with you. You can if you want to see John out in the field flipping over tins, we actually did a Kentucky Afield segment years ago, Mammoth Cave National Park, I believe.
Yeah, and you guys were hilarious. Because you were walking on the tin so you wouldn't step in the grass, and then I turn over a piece of tin, it had 4 copperheads under it, and all of a sudden, all the Kentucky Afield crew jumps off the tin. And they're walking in the grass.
Yeah, we were like, well, where did they go?
It was hilarious.
Like, right here where we're standing somewhere. Careful with your next step. I remember that. Are there any new bird species that have been introduced to Kentucky that are invasive?
Introduced, nothing large scale. We have our usual suspects like European starlings, rock pigeons, and like house sparrows that are pretty widespread throughout the U.S. even, that are invasive. Occasionally we get pet, parakeets and stuff like that get released, but it's a little bit too cold for them to establish a breeding population. There are a few that are on our prohibited species list that we do not want introduced, and we're actively looking for people that have those birds so that they can't be released.
Moving wildlife from one location to the next is a really big deal, really serious. We've kind of talked about different species. You talked about, seeing a salamander that was brought in by the Lazarus family.
The lizard, but yeah.
Yeah, lizard. But those type of things, we may talk about where you can see them now, but the impact they're going to have on that new location could be catastrophic. So you don't want to be moving animal species from location to location, even within the state from one location to the next. You're telling me there's certain areas where some species are in Kentucky, but they don't reside in other parts of Kentucky. We don't need to be moving those animal species around, do we?
No, but it's always a bad idea to do that, but usually they don't survive.
Yeah. So you're probably, if you're taking it there in hopes of starting a new population and them living, you may have doomed that particular individual.
Yeah, I know a guy who tried to get tiger salamanders started in Powell County, and they hung on there for about 10 years, and they finally died out. Powell County is just not tiger salamander habitat.
Yeah. So not a good idea. And in some situations, it could also be highly illegal. So be very cautious on moving animal species from location to location. Next, can you share any tips or resources for planting a native pollinator plot at your home? Do we have anything online where you can talk about or people can go to figure out exactly the best way to do this?
We do. We actually have a planting brochure on our website. If you go to the Monarch butterfly tab and scroll to the bottom, you can click and we have a brochure that suggests a variety of plants that you can put in your backyard to attract butterflies. And really, I mean, you know, like we were talking about before, sometimes it comes down to the simple things like turning your lights off at night, you know, not using pesticides or insecticides, and just trying to plant, you know, plants that insects can nectar on. If you're thinking about it, you know, you're looking at your yard, and if you don't see anywhere that insects can hide, they of course can't see anything either. You need like some shrubs, some plants. You know, a lot of these species may overwinter in the leaves. So if you can leave, you know, maybe you don't have to leave your yard full of leaves in the fall, but if you can leave some patches of leaves where, you know, some of our butterflies and moths can make their cocoon or chrysalis and overwinter, just small things like that can really make a huge difference.
Okay, very cool. How many species of animals are in Kentucky? I didn't give a particular, it just said how many species. You guys want to get our fingers and toes out and start counting? No, we're talking
Thousands.
thousands.
Nobody knows, because you have to include insects.
Yeah, so it's,
The insects drive up our number massively.
We probably have more species of beetles than everything else put together.
really. So yeah, so there are tons and tons and tons. Well, that finishes up all of our questions. Hopefully your question got answered. If not, you can always reach out to our biologist. Give us a call, 1-800-858-1549. And also, make sure that you look into becoming a member of Kentucky Wild. To learn more about Kentucky Wild, go to fw.ky.gov/kywild. And remember, hunting and fishing on private property is a privilege. Always ask permission and thank the landowner. Until next week, I'm your host, Chad Miles. I hope to see you in the woods or on the water.